have waged an assault against those who would set him free. So it has been since time immemorial. So it was for Scientology in 1984. To unite, advance, support, and protect the Scientology religion and Scientologists in all parts of the world so as to achieve the aims of Scientology. Such was the purpose set forth at the dawn of the IAS. Such is our eternal pledge to all mankind. Our history, an epic battle played out on the global stage, where to lose means oblivion, but to win means planetary salvation. Our motto, never give in, never give up. And at the end of the day, we always emerge victorious, not only for Scientology, but for all mankind. Our hallmark, unrelenting commitment and enduring compassion, extending a hand however, wherever, and whenever. We uphold man's dignity by infusing this world with the means by which to uplift this civilization. We bear the responsibility to reverse the dwindling spiral by bringing on LRH solutions at correct orders of magnitude. We plant islands of sanity and truth at the very pillars of this culture in the name of planetary clearing. All while extending the glory of OT to every continental soul in the name of eternity itself. And so today, we stand as a global force for total freedom, now disseminating our help and technology to every corner of Earth. We are dauntless. We are defiant. We are the most resolute group this world has ever seen. We are the IAS. Thank you very much. Thank you.
you. The more I say it, the more you go. All right. All right, thank you. Thank you. All right, thank you. All right. All right, thank you. Well, thank you very much, and yes, I too am happy to see you. Now, of course, it's not that any of us went anywhere. Then again, that's the point. Because as LRH said, religion is the first sense of community. Moreover, sense of community occurs by reason of mutual experience with others. If such is the case, and it most definitely is the case, then let me now state as absolute fact. There is no communal experience that compares to when our clans descend from north to south and east to west, all to this prime meridian of East Grinstead and Saint Hill, and especially when I tell you, by the end of this evening, our mutual experience is going to metaphorically blow the roof right off the top of this marquee, and who knows, maybe even blow a hole right through the North Star, and that's why I say welcome to this 39th anniversary of the IAS. Of course, owing to the elapsed time since we last met, this evening's event will cover a lot of ground, although make no mistake, time will fly as if in a flash. But as a first preliminary word, let's begin with another mutual experience we all had, and the very reason for how long ago we last celebrated. Now, I could speak of COVID, pandemic, lockdowns, and restrictions, but everybody knows all that. Rather, I am speaking of why it was a defining moment, in fact, making the urgency of our mission so manifest. For suddenly, in an instant, society went into a turmoil, and out went the props. Or as LRH describes, people lived in a system correctness, and things went right so long as nothing was going wrong. Then one day, things go wrong, until all that mattered was that question of questions from which comes the supreme test of a being, the one that reads, who will make things go right in spite of anything and everything? To which we answered, the IAS. And as of tonight, this is what it looks like. Before the beginning and in the beginning, as of 1984, Scientology spanned 39 nations. But as of tonight, with IAS members planting flags in every inhabitable zone of Earth, from the tip of South America's Patagonia to the rim of the Arctic Circle, the IAS torch burns bright in no less than 158 lands. And nation to nation, that movement united in a flash of yellow to answer the global call for help. A volunteer minister force like never in history. In fact, expanding 8 times over, all to prove something can be done about it. And so, while time ticked inexorably, while the world went on lockdown, our VMs clocked in 9 million hours of one-on-one indiscriminate help. while for the rest of humanity, we reached out with all our help over the airwaves and online, all of which only drove further demand. UNICEF, Salvation Army, Amnesty International combined every one of them, and we answered with more than 4 times the solutions for a populace in desperate need. While in turn, the world replied with an avalanche of gratitude, from U.S. Federal Emergency Management for restoring values to the lives of others, Canada's House of Commons for raising awareness on drugs, the African Union for advocating peace building in our societies, and so came partnerships with every other sector and strata of societal influence, including human rights commissions, civic forums, ministries, legislatures, parliaments, and national governments, until in full and overall you are looking at 29,000 new partnerships in just the last 4 years. But if that is recognition in the here and now, this is recognition for all eternity. Beginning with the war is over in the USA, we relentlessly pushed forward to create the same everywhere else. And so comes an unending parade of religious recognitions year after year all over this globe, and now extending to the gateway to Europe in the Netherlands, where a 20-year battle culminates with full recognition, and the same again in the land where LRH himself christened the flagship Apollo, and where this year the nation of Greece likewise bestows full recognition. And finally, a third to be revealed later tonight. But even so, everything thus far only takes us to the starting line, the entrance gates to Scientology itself. And today, it begins with the Scientology Network. Launched just 1 year before we last met, our timing could not have been better. For when the pandemic hit, the universal watchword suddenly became binge watching. And we are talking no less than 20 million new viewers to Scientology TV. But they aren't just binge watching, they are also binge studying, as network episodes drive them to online courses, problems of work, fundamentals of thought, tools for life, and altogether amounting to 1.2 million course completions. Yet if everything thus far is out there, let's now return to our world, where no pandemic restriction or lockdown could ever stop the infusion, all amounting to highest ever course completions. And so it continues up the bridge as the floodgates open in this brief breath of eternity. An academy completion every 25 minutes, a release or clear every 7 minutes, and an ascent from clear to eternity at whole new orders of magnitude, blowing the doors open to heights not previously envisioned, with new OTs highest ever in all our history. Although in the end, the one that says building the bridge right to the stars is our ever-expanding cosmos of ideal lords. So, for your action definition of not on pause, how about the acquisition of 20 new buildings for future ideal facilities, spanning 10 countries at almost 1 million square feet, while, just for good measure, another 10 new ideal facilities done and ready for a grand opening. And yes, that's why I say, welcome to the universe of boundless expansion and this IES anniversary 2023. As is traditional, tonight we will review all that ensued from our IES pledge to mankind, and to that extent, the meaning of full responsibility. So yes, tonight's presentation will include epic accomplishments through our planetary rescue operations, from global salvage for oppressed populations to volunteer ministers for indiscriminate help. While following from that same equation, you will also meet this year's IAS Freedom Medal winners, and thus those who epitomize uncompromising commitment. To which I will further add a first ever, namely, and not that it is a requirement, but every medal recipient tonight happens to be a new OT8. And finally, you will also see not one, not two, not three, but actually 4 new ideal facilities. By the time you've seen them all, it will have taken your breath away. So, with that, let's get it going. And for openers, let us begin where we always begin, at basic on the chain of planetary aberration. In that regard, it is neither overstatement or cliche to say, if you are looking for the greatest evil on earth, look no further than psychiatry. But now, let's combine that whole track fact with these past 4 years in the wake of the global pandemic. First, what with government-ordered lockdowns, stay-at-home orders, and a constant barrage of nothing but bad news, and next, adding to the dangerous environment the factors of no space, not to mention no work and no production. And yes, I say that with that level of oppression and suppression, it would be unusual if a lot of people were not depressed. But the psychs have never seen any sort of expected human behavior they could not diagnose as a disease, just as they have never failed to profit from human misfortune and catastrophe. Hence, the psychs announcing that 1 in 3 adults planet-wide are living with the so-called disease of anxiety disorder, and hence a rise in prescription psych drugs to nearly 25% of the adult population in the U.S. alone. And don't forget, while the pandemic itself may be over, all those adults are still hooked on the drugs. So no, this is not some allegory, this is real. And that's why the mission of CCHR is more vital today than ever. All of which brings us to the overriding CCHR strategy of inform, expose, prosecute, and obliterate. And to once again remind you of how it all rolls out, here is the recap. All commences at the Citizens Commission on Human Rights headquarters in Los Angeles. It's home to the Industry of Death Museum, exposing the history of psychiatric crime and horror. Museum contents are then replicated in mobile death exhibits to inform, enlighten, and enrage across 6 continents. Simultaneously, CCHR disseminates materials and evidence to those best equipped and most inclined to take action: regulatory officials, malpractice attorneys, and investigative journalists. Meanwhile, and continuously, Scientology Network Television broadcasts the array of CCHR documentary exposés, at which point enlightened viewers connect with CCHR's online activation network and their engage tools for immediate civil and criminal complaints to stoke the flames of retribution. The pressure continues to mount as CCHR engages their enforcement arm, prosecuting their crimes, slashing psych budgets, and shutting down their institutions, at which point anti-psych legislation indeed descends to forever rid this world of psychiatry, and hence the CCHR campaign tagline, Psychiatry, Global Erasure. And with that, let's now take a look at that first stage of CCHR's strategic rollout, namely to inform. It takes on added significance when you consider the pandemic restrictions prevented the psychs from holding their annual get-togethers and conventions, which in turn prevented CCHR from greeting them at same-set events. All of which poses the interesting question, as in, perhaps the psychs thought CCHR had forgotten about them? If so, if that's what the psychs thought, I'll give the diagnosis free of charge. Delusion. And with that, here is but a sampling of CCHR activity up close and personal. Morales, Mexico. At the express request of the State Undersecretary for Youth, CCHR lends a death exhibit in the capital's Central Square. Leading the ribbon cutting is a government youth director who sounds the alarm on psychiatry's link to rising suicide rates. Whereupon no less than 5,000 peruse the panels on the first day. Those touring include outraged social workers for the fact they've been kept in the dark on psychiatry and the havoc it's wreaked on children's lives. At which point, word continues to spread like chain lightning until CCHR has informed 14,000 one-on-one, and Morales' leading news outlet carries the message to 500,000 more. Canada, where CCHR steps up right inside the University of Ottawa. The exhibit opens with a university alumnus, now lawyer, who scorches the psychiatric agenda for children in particular. Whereafter scores of psych undergrads are burning up at being lied to all along, and CCHR's president fans the flames with the big picture across a national Canadian network. Milano, Italy. CCHR rolls into the landmark medieval palace at City Center. Among those taking the podium is a regional counselor who is demanding to end the dark ages of psychiatric institutions and coercion, and instead urges a new enlightened age of human rights. The message resounds with Italian media who carry it region-wide. While in every other dark corner psychs thought they could carry on with impunity, there blazes CCHR, enlightening yet another new person every 20 seconds, crisscrossing 10 nations on 4 continents, and delivering 130,000 booklets, portfolios, and DVDs into newfound psychbuster hands. But all of that is just the appetizer for CCHR's main course. United Kingdom. The psychs think they can slip into London under the radar for a World Congress. But CCHR is charged and ready, firing out a public warning on the horrors of ECT. CCHR allies flank the action with a demand for a public inquiry on psychiatric brutality, all while CCHR troops fan out with key facts everyone needs to know. And if you're wondering why those psychs look forlorn, lost, and altogether mystified, well, it's because Congress organizers locked the doors to hide from CCHR and consequently locked out their own people. And hence, their midweek seminar with a whopping 6 attendees. But no worry, members of Parliament filled the void with a call to ban electric shock. Florence, Italy. The World Congress of Psychiatric Genetics thinks they can find cover behind fortress walls. Well, think again, because some 500 psychbusters are out in force to expose what really makes up the psychiatric DNA and call for an end to the abuse. Hence, Florentine headlines calling for an end to violations of the dignity of people. Germany. The psychs convened for their annual Congress in Berlin, so CCHR converges for their annual psych bust. It runs for 7 kilometers along the central shopping street, where Berliners are treated to a dramatization of what psychs inflict. But that was just an opening salvo, what with the CCHR death exhibit entrenched right outside the Congress entrance, much to the relief of psychiatrists now turned whistleblowers and who can't wait to work with CCHR, but much to the chagrin of Congress leaders who, try as they might, can't cure the disorder that has plagued German psychiatry since day one, Although, in the epitome of understatement, they do admit they are mentally challenged on the subject of ethics, and that from the association president himself. France. Paris plays host to the European Congress of Psychiatry, so CCHR sends out the 300-man welcoming committee. They do banners, placards, and drum corps until fan clubs form in street-side balconies. But here's what you can't see from the street. The Psychs hold no less than 6 debates and forums in a futile attempt to counter CCHR exposés of their coercive treatments and druggings. And the punchline? There's a reason those people with the posters are at every one of our congresses. Finally, there's San Francisco. The annual APA Forum gathers beneath the tagline, mental health filled with challenges. And never more so than now, since CCHR plants a death exhibit right around the corner, and where nearly 400 psychs get a reality check on their profession. Whereupon, a legion of CCHR psych busters advance from the Embarcadero Plaza and straight on down Market Street. So, yes, talk about shock and awe, psychs watching from the rooftop, psychs glued to their iPhone cameras, all while more than 500 news feeds magnify the impact. But what truly makes this story a CCHR classic are the candid confessions from the psychs themselves. You don't actually need tests to make an ADHD diagnosis. Even worse, antidepressants will trigger full-blown manic episodes. And worse again, the stimulants do the same things with the brain as cocaine does. Even more blunt, it feels like what we're really doing is hitting people over the head with hammers. And cutting right to the chase, psychiatrists are a dying species. So no, it's no wonder what preoccupies their days. It's right in the Congress agenda with lectures like, "Am I ready for my patients to see their records?" Or seminars like risk mitigation strategies, and finally, ethics and engagement in mental health, although in fact they had to cancel that one since apparently no psych had the expertise to deliver it. And when you combine it all across the length and breadth of psychdom, that's how CCHR exposed the psych con, both one-on-one and all over the media, awakening more than 50 million to the horrors of psychiatry, and all of it thanks to your support of the IAS. Of course, it is one thing to enlighten and inform, but the one that gives psychiatrists an anxiety disorder that no prescription will ever calm is stage 2 of CCHR strategy, namely prosecution. CCHR International in Los Angeles. It's the global clearinghouse for documentation, analysis, and pursuit of psychiatric criminality. And with real-time tracking across both hemispheres, here is but a sampling of how CCHR brought the culprits to justice. An incoming alert tags one Dr. Chima of New York's Upstate Psychiatric Clinic. Suspected crime? Healthcare fraud of astronomic proportions. So CCHR zeroes in and takes pursuit. From his small-town office, the doctor touts his skills at treating thousands of patients. But in fact, he lives in his own alternate universe because video surveillance reveals a pathological liar, as in making up in-person visits for non-existent patients and falsely billing insurance for $30 a day. All told, he submits more than 5,000 fraudulent claims for an estimated $1.8 million. CCHR passes the evidence to New York's Office of Professional Misconduct with an official complaint, at which point it breaks on ABC News, and Chima is not only stripped of his license, he also goes down for federal fraud. Next is a Tennessee psych by the name of Richard Farmer. He specializes in opioid addiction, which is ironic considering he comes under scrutiny for overprescribing. And that's putting it mildly, since apparently anyone can get a fix from the doctor. Addicts, Facebook friends, you name it. Altogether totaling tens of thousands of prescriptions. So CCHR immediately alerts the state health department. The story first hits on local news and then goes national when a Tennessee attorney general skewers the doctor for helping fuel the opioid epidemic. Whereupon Farmer gets to swallow 2 pills, license revoked, and 4 years in a federal penitentiary. Then there's the celebrity psychiatrist out of Massachusetts, Dr. Keith Ablow. He is touted as one of the 5 most influential psychiatrists alive. Ablow thrives on dishing out his psych advice, landing hundreds of appearances across network and cable news. But he also lands in CCHR's tracking system when he's reported for illegal prescriptions. Among the many reports is that the doctor likes to give double-dose prescriptions, meaning he keeps the extra dosage for his own enjoyment. CCHR packages the evidence detailing Ablow's crimes and dispatches a formal complaint to the Drug Enforcement Administration field office in Boston. And when DEA officials next take matters into their own hands, Ablow is once again all over the news with ratings he never imagined. A daylight raid on both his home and his office, and all for the fact he poses a serious threat to the public health, safety, and welfare, whereupon Ablow is out of a career and permanently off the air. But if you want the full readout for the likes of forgery, violent assault, and even murder, then here's the tally now stamped on global rap sheets. 69 counts of flagrant fraud, 132 counts of substance abuse and professional incompetence, more than 200 counts of immoral conduct, human trafficking, and other sordid felonies, all of which gives more than 400 psychs a lifetime prescription of their own medicine. And yes, that's sending psychs to a place they can finally call their own on this 39th anniversary of the IAS. Beyond exposing psychs as the single most criminal profession on earth, we come to the next stage of CCHR operations, namely, shutting down their criminal institutions. And while that word institutions can sound quite official, don't be fooled, because today it's become a private industry of profit-making hospitals. In fact, no less than a corporate empire and the biggest money-making machine in the mental health market. But here is CCHR reducing their return on investment to zero. Torino, in Italy's Piedmont region. It's where welfare agencies run a rip-off scheme, removing kids from their families for any imaginable reason, and filling psychiatric foster homes to collect as much as 400 euros per child per day. But now enter CCHR Torino. They've been tracking the alarming numbers, and in 2020, they convene a joint CCHR death exhibit and conference to mobilize a coordinated response. At the fore is the Chief of Staff of Piedmont's Regional Council, who is also a CCHR commissioner. Joining him is the regional counselor for families, and she vows to fight with all her force to end the reign of terror on Piedmont families, after which Torino dailies illuminate the issue for 800,000 region-wide. Consequently, CCHR is next fielding an urgent abuse report that a child's life hangs in the balance at the Daphne Youth Center, whereupon that regional counselor for families immediately enlists a national TV news team for a surprise inspection, and it's just as bad as CCHR feared. Kids drugged into oblivion, kids all but incapacitated, all for profit, and while reporters then liken the place to Dante's Inferno, the regional health department sends the Daphne Center straight to Hades. Then there's the UK, home to the British mega chain of private institutions known as Signet. It's one of the UK's biggest psychiatric cash cows, with headline news of their booming profits. But now enter CCHR UK, because they've been fielding an influx of abuse complaints that are likewise booming. So CCHR digs into Signet finances with incisive forensic accounting, and suddenly the penny drops. Although supposedly private, Signet has actually conned the National Health Service to pay for every patient with taxpayer funds. And the numbers are astronomical, upwards of £700,000 per patient per year. CCHR assembles a blistering white paper exposing the scheme, and they fire it out to every single member of parliament and every UK oversight agency. CCHR flanks it with a barrage of formal complaints to UK's Care Quality Commission, the agency responsible for monitoring all UK healthcare. Finally, it erupts, with Care Quality prying open Signet doors with unannounced inspections exposing the House of Horrors. The Yew Tree Center in Essex, patients restrained and tranquilized just for the hell of it. It blows up in the media, and 10 staffers immediately take the fall, that is, until Yew Trees is chopped down for good. Thor's Park in North Essex. Patients are put in harm's way while staffers sleep on the job, which in turn sparks a media probe revealing rampant negligence. And so, the hammer drops on Thor's. The Godden Green Child Psych Clinic in Kent. Inspection reveals rampant bullying by the older kids, who in turn are bullied by clinic staff. And so, Godden is the next to go down. At which point, institutions are soon falling all over UK's private psychiatric industry, and no, all the King's men can't put the pieces back together again, not with 11 institutions shut down forever. All of which takes us to the USA, source point for the entire scheme of private profit-making hospitals and the largest psychiatric market on earth. But it's also where CCHR International has been dismantling psych facilities for years. Nevertheless, even they have never seen the likes of Sequel, which blew sky high right in the midst of the pandemic. The flashpoint is in Michigan at a Sequel center known as Lakeside. A 16-year-old boy tosses a sandwich in the cafeteria, 7 adults restrain and smother the kid, and 12 minutes later, he suffers a fatal cardiac arrest. Appropriately, it goes incendiary all over the news, in fact, even igniting an online petition from the masses demanding justice. Yet, believe it or not, 2 months later, Lakeside is still standing. The CCHR was not in any way finished, as in CCHR next compiling a scorching expose and demand for action firebomb to every Michigan state legislator, and response was swift. The 2 guilty caretakers go down for manslaughter, and that Lakeside facility is shut down with prejudice. But CCHR still wasn't finished, not by a long way, because in the wake of Lakeside, their website was practically melting down with abuse alerts from all over the sequel empire. Hence, CCHR next detailing and assembling all the facts and crimes: physical abuse, over-drugging, even more fatalities, and all of it disseminated to every major media outlet. At which point, no less than NBC is running with it, airing an expose to 7 million nationwide, and which in turn triggers governmental demands for a federal investigation. And talk about apocalyptic, what with Sequel Center shutting down, first in North Carolina, next in Wyoming, then their mother facility in Iowa, one after another, a chain reaction across the U.S. until it's no less than 14 sequel facilities out of business, dead and gone. And when you consider that sort of action across the rest of the psychiatric money-making machine, that's the story of how CCHR triggered a domino effect, putting nearly 100 institutions out of business and thereby gutting $1.6 billion from the psych balance sheet for this IS anniversary 2023. For all that, however, there is one final story of CCHR accomplishment, and truth be told, it embraces and punctuates everything you have thus far seen. Because this one not only demonstrates how much ground psychiatry has lost, but it's also one that affects psychiatry's future in ways which cannot yet be predicted. All of which is to say, there are wins rightfully labeled as victories, and then there are accomplishments that can only be classified as milestone victories. Of course, such victories don't just happen. They're the result of a lot of doing this, a lot of persistence, a lot of dones. To give the blow-by-blow on this one would take hours because it is the result of decades of CCHR work to achieve no less than a sea change, a profound transformation in the powers that be mindset regarding psychiatry. So, without giving the 1,001 details, let me distill it down to the bottom line situation. First, it goes right to the heart of CCHR. After all, they are the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. Now, believe it or not, it has actually been quite a challenge to get human rights and governmental bodies to correlate psychiatric barbarities with human rights abuse, and especially in European nations. How can that be? Well, believe it or not, in Europe, coercive psychiatry, abusive, involuntary, and forced treatment has actually been considered to be a human right. You did not mishear me. So as for the how, it all began post-World War II when the European Convention on Human Rights was formulated and adopted to prevent another Holocaust. It is a very important document and quite well-founded, but unfortunately, and that is putting it mildly, there is a loophole. Specifically, Article 5 of that Convention on Human Rights gives one the right to liberty and security. It states, "No one shall be deprived of his liberty, save in the following cases and in accordance with a procedure prescribed by law." Whereupon, those following cases include the lawful detention of persons for the prevention of the spreading of infectious diseases, of persons of unsound mind, alcoholics or drug addicts or vagrants. And right there you have it. The lawful detention of persons of so-called unsound mind has been considered a human right. It's right in the convention. So, a human right intended to prevent another Hitler and Nazi party has been misinterpreted to allow and enforce exactly what the Nazis themselves had done. Even more, Article 5 is what the Psychs have used to get governments to enact laws in the name of coercive psychiatry. Now, while one could attempt to change every psych-inspired law in nation after nation, that could be an endless exercise, quite honestly, with little chance of full success. But on the other hand, one could bypass the massive government machinery and go right to the source of the problem. That is, by instead addressing the most senior human rights body on earth and to which every member nation is answerable. In brief, and with great velocity, here is how CCHR did just that. Today, across the planet, no less than 98 governments have laws authorizing involuntary commitment. In fact, another person is involuntarily committed every 30 seconds. But now let's go to Brussels, Belgium, capital of Europe and the site of the European Commission, the Council of the European Union, and the European Parliament. More to the point, it is also the site of our IAS-sponsored Ideal Org and European Human Rights Office. Their CCHR unit has been tracking and investigating European coercive psychiatry for decades. Moreover, they are also the coordinating point for international CCHR action directed to international human rights bodies, all of which are headquartered in Europe. As a combined force, CCHR has compiled official white papers and human rights complaints exposing abuses world over. By way of example, in Australia, exposing forced drugging of children, New Zealand exposing torture and cruel treatments, Denmark exposing coercive measures, and more again in Finland, Norway, Spain, Iceland, Canada, Germany, Sweden, Italy, Japan, on and on, directly to the United Nations Council on Human Rights, and all to expose coercive psychiatric abuses across 18 nations. Well, finally, it broke with an official invitation to CCHR from no less than the Office of the High Commissioner, whereupon CCHR is next in Geneva, Switzerland, at the United Nations European headquarters. And it is historic, the first ever UN consultation on human rights in mental health. Moreover, CCHR has a rarefied seat at the experts table. They also have a voice. Ban coercion and the deprivations of liberty in mental health. Such was the sum and substance of the official recommendation of that UN consultation, and which next landed before the UN Human Rights Council itself. And when the High Commissioner put it to vote by the full assembly, psychiatry's reign of abuse with impunity was over, because from the world's most senior human rights body, coercion and involuntary treatment are outdated, ineffective, and incompatible with human rights. All nations should cancel forced institutionalization. All nations should end involuntary treatment practices, and the creation of new psychiatric hospitals is prohibited, and yes, that's by UN decree to 193 nations of Earth. And yes, that's CCHR for the eradication of psychiatry in the name of human rights for this 39th anniversary of the IAS. With that, we come to the final word on psychiatry and the first Freedom Medal winner of the night. It's a tale that exemplifies every facet of the CCHR campaign strategy, and in this case, what it takes to face down the criminal psychiatric empire on behalf of 120 million people. Moreover, it's a tale in emphasis of the fact that a single individual, motivated by the purpose of CCHR, armed with truth and supported by an invincible third dynamic, can indeed take the enemy and win.
There's a Japanese proverb that dates back to the 8th century, a maxim that is woven into the cultural fabric to this day. And it's one that allows Japanese psychs to hide their crimes in plain sight. Because when it comes to psychiatry in Japan, it's see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. But shattering the silence and exposing psychiatry secrets is CCHR and IAS Freedom Medal winner for 2023, Yuzuru Ogura. A native of Kawasaki, Yuzuru followed in his father's footsteps, taking over the family's network of sports clubs. After discovering Scientology at a WISE seminar, he took his first steps on the bridge, and today he is a new OT8. But it was when he saw a young swimming prodigy turned into a zombie by psych drugs that he learned about CCHR, stepping up as a frontline psych buster, and ultimately ascending to Executive Director, CCHR Japan.
多くの日本人が精神科医たちによる犯罪に目を向けることができませんでした。私はその彼らの目を開かせるために、ある一人の精神科医の犯罪を暴露することによってそれを成し遂げようと考えました。
Yuzuru begins with a traditional CCHR strategy. If you want to expose psychiatric abuse, first, you've got to get someone to talk. He hits social media to coax whistleblowers to come forward. Yuzuru punctuates his message with an invitation to an Industry of Death exhibit at the very birthplace of Japanese psychiatry, the University of Tokyo. There, exactly according to Yuzuru's plan, a victim's mother steps forward. She speaks for her 27-year-old daughter, who killed herself while under the care of a psych named Yamaguchi. And the mother discovered why. The psych hooked her on drugs, then had his way with her. With CCHR in the mother's corner, she takes her story to the press, fueling public outrage. And when another emboldened whistleblower speaks out, Yuzuru uncovers 10 more Yamaguchi victims. At which point, CCHR slices the facade to ribbons, filing a criminal complaint with the Kagoshima police, which in turn sparks narcotics department raids on the psych's clinics. And Yamaguchi's walk of shame airs all over Japanese TV, whereupon it's the land of the setting sun for the psych. His clinics obliterated, his license eviscerated, and Yamaguchi himself behind bars.
人々は精神科医たちによる犯罪に対して目を向け始めました。しかし、向精神薬による錬金術に関してはまだ隠されたままで、私はこれを白日の下にさらそうと決意しました。
Yuzuru's next target, a psychotropic monster drugging people to death. His CCHR team tracks the correlation between overdrugging and suicide. It's a psych practice known as Polypharma. Since psychs get paid by the prescription, they put patients on a suicide-inducing cocktail of psychotropics, up to 80 pills a day. To strike a blow against the drugging scandal, Yuzuru connects with a prominent physician, one Dr. Satoru Utsumi. Yuzuru downloads the sordid tale of psychs and psychotropics, giving the doctor a glimpse into the black heart of the demon. The result? Dr. Utsumi unleashes a book exposing phony diseases and killer drugs. It's entitled Psychiatrists Are Terrible, Even Today. Yuzuru and the doctor follow with a series of tell-all anti-psych lectures, an expert panel on World Mental Health Day, an Industry of Death exhibit in Tokyo's Asakusa Hall, and another right on the floor of Japanese Parliament. But what ultimately sets off a psych-busting tsunami is a CCHR-inspired national expose on NHK television and a relentless march of newspaper headlines until the Ministry of Health has no choice but to punish psychs for over-the-top drugging and stamp black box warnings on no less than 66 psychotropics, all of which culminates in suicide rates dropping a dramatic 34%.
その時点で彼らがこれまで伝統としてきた秘密というものを断ち切るために、私は彼らの犯罪的行為が表沙汰にされるための法律の制定を決意しました。
Yuzuru and CCHR zero in on reported abuse at a psych hospital in Kobe City, uncovering footage of 6 nurses brutally assaulting a patient. Yuzuru advances on Kobe City Council, demanding action. The council answers with a petition calling for patient protections, addressed to no less than the Prime Minister and every member of National Parliament. Yuzuru repeats the pattern in Yamato, in Yokohama, in Osaka, and another 50 cities more, raising the collective voice of 45 million citizens of Japan until there are no more secrets in Japanese psychiatry, because by order of the National Parliament, anyone discovering patient abuse must report it immediately. Any patient suffering abuse has the right to report it. And any and all whistleblowers are fully protected under the law. So yes, that's forever guaranteeing psychiatric abuse will be seen, heard, and spoken of in the land of the rising sun. IAS Freedom Medal winner for 2023, Yuzuru Osura.
ありがとうございます。
No wonder the guys are trying to give me
武士道
medication.
を受け継ぐものとして、これ以上の誉れはありませ
I
ん。
try something different, you know. I don't
侍は
want to get involved in that. You know.
刀を
I think it's always better
闇
to
雲
go
に
natural
振
way,
る
you
こと
know?
ではありません。
For anything really in life.
私は
Exactly, yeah.
LRH とその技術のおかげで唯一の敵、精神医学的を絞り、真実と銘打った価値を20年以上にわたり浴びせ続けてきました。
Thank you very much. As someone who inherited Bushido, the code of a samurai, there is no bigger honor. A samurai does not blindly swing around his katana sword, and thanks to LRH and the tech, I have aimed my sword of truth for more than 20 years at my only enemy, psychiatry.
私たちの戦う姿に触れ、これまで欺かれてきた侍たちは次々に目を覚ましました。私たちは多くの勇敢な侍たちをサイクバスターとして鍛え上げ、CCHR の上りのもとに団結させ、そしてついに精神医学を法のもとに戻しました。
Other samurai saw how we fought, and then those who were betrayed started to wake up one after another. We trained up those courageous samurais as Psychbusters, uniting them under the banner of CCHR. And together, we put psychiatry back under the law.
Samurai は勝って兜の尾を締めよです。この戦いはこれからもさらに続きます。そして私は精神医学に対し完全な勝利、つまり精神医学の惑星規模の消滅を勝ち取るまで戦い続けます。
A samurai knows that after victory you must tighten your helmet because there are many more battles ahead. And I will be ready to face psychiatry again and again until we win the total victory, global erasure of psychiatry.
ありがとうございます。妻の千鶴子さん、どこで何をしているかわからない時も私を常に信じて支えてくれたこと感謝します。
Thank you to my wife, Chizuko. Even though you did not always know what I was doing and where I was going, you have always supported me.
日本で最初のフリーダムメダル受賞者の南浩二さんと、東京の DSA スタッフの米田典康さん、あなた方の有能さと勇敢さを心から称えさせていただきます。そして日本中のすべての CCHR ボランティアの皆さん、これは私たちチームのウィンです。
I would like to acknowledge the first Japanese IES Freedom Medal winner, Koji Minami, and Tokyo DSA staff Noriyasu Yaneda for your competence and courage, and to all my CCHR volunteers in all of Japan, this is our team win.
「私たちの真のリーダー RTC 会長へこの世の闇の中で LRH が示した完全な自由への道筋を私たち全員のために照らしてくださっていることに感謝いたします。
Is to COB, our true leader, in the darkness of this world, you have lit up for us all LRH's path to total freedom. Thank you, sir.
そして LRH へ、あなたは真の敵の存在を世に知らしめ、そこに向き合う最高の武器を提供してくださいました。私たちの永遠に向けた生存を確かにしてくださった唯一の存在です。私はこれからも戦い続け、この地球上から精神医学を完全に根絶させてみせます。
And to LRH, you exposed our true enemy in society, and you provided us with the best weapon to confront it. You were the only being who has guaranteed our survival for eternity. I promise firmly that I will continue to fight to eradicate psychiatry completely from this earth.
ありがとうございます。LRH
And with that, let's now move on to the next frontier of IES might in the name of human salvage. In that regard, it follows directly from all you have just seen, namely, the devastating consequences of psychiatric influence since the middle of the last century. And by that, I am referencing the most insidious psychiatric abuse, the false data they have inflicted into every sector and echelon of society. So yes, we can and do work to end psychiatry's barbaric abuses, and yes, we will carry on until it is done. But the moment you obliterate psychiatry, you are left with its misbegotten children, including drug abuse, because what difference does it make when you are already hooked on psychotropics? Immorality, because there is no such thing as right when everybody is wrong. And a wanton disregard for human rights, because what's another human being one way or another? Now, combine those factors with these last 4 years since the onset of the pandemic. drug abuse soaring with overdose deaths for adolescents doubling in the U.S. alone. Human rights violations rising in nearly 150 nations, and after a years-long improvement, crime rates now flipping for the worst worldwide. All of which is to say, our IES-sponsored campaigns designed to uplift populations from societal collapse could not be more imperative. And so, once again, to remind you, here is a recap of the strategic rollout. Drug-free world to arrest a biochemical decline. United for Human Rights to make those rights a fact. And the way to happiness to restore lost dignity and honor. Each campaign commences with targeted mail-ins to initiate a popular groundswell among guidance counselors, prevention specialists, and law enforcement officers, all now embracing the truth about drugs, instructors, professors, and social activists adopting United for Human Rights on behalf of student bodies, even as curriculum directors, correctional officers, and human resource managers spread the 21 precepts across their spheres of influence. Concurrently and continuously, all campaign documentaries and related programming air on our Scientology network, thereby drawing viewers to websites where they enroll on online courses, while also acquiring materials requisite to driving programs even farther afield. And that's how, community by community and nation by nation, we inspire a movement to rebuild this world as drug-free, crime-free, moral, and humane, and so we accomplish Operation Global Salvage. Make no mistake, the scope of our IES-sponsored global campaigns today has grown to astronomical proportions. So while I've already highlighted statistics on the societal consequences of the pandemic, there is another side of the coin. Namely, the vital need to address the factors of human rights, drug abuse, and immorality has never been more real to the populace out there. Yes, they are reaching for our answers. Case in point, more than 45 million requests fulfilled with our printed educational materials since we last met. And here's but a sampling of how that translates into action. The first campaign in our planetary salvage agenda stems from the hard-won fact that all human rights require a populace to be ever vigilant. It's all the more relevant given that during the pandemic, authoritarian leaders exploited emergency measures, populations took down their guard, and consequently, a global human freedom index saw liberties fall for 90% of the world. You better believe our human rights campaign emissaries were ready to reawaken vigilance anywhere and everywhere. And that's exactly what they did, raising high the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, now celebrating its 75th year. By way of example, El Salvador, the country fell 16 positions on the Global Freedom Index, but Youth for Human Rights brought its mission to the National Legislative Assembly during a world educational tour, at which point a legislative commissioner of youth calls for human rights education to salvage all of Salvadorian society. The Secretary of Culture answers the call, endorsing mandatory teaching of all 30 articles in Salvadorian schools, and that in turn sparks a pledge from the Alliance of Central American Leaders to carry it forward nationwide. Mexico's Nayarit state. It was riding near the bottom of the nation's peace index, but new government leadership wants to change course. And so they sponsor a regional Youth for Human Rights summit for all of Latin America. It draws representatives from 15 nations and all 32 Mexican states. And at which point the governor himself announces a crusade to educate every citizen on the Universal Declaration. Consequently, program delivery is next running through regional schools, whereupon a first 15,000 gained solid footing on the 30 articles, and hence the words of gratitude from the state Congress for creating ambassadors of tolerance and peace, all of which propels us to a global stage in South Korea. It's a beacon of peace in one of the most precarious zones on Earth, and thus she hosts the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates, the annual gathering of the world's most eminent human rights champions. The summit features a Youth for Human Rights workshop on stepping stones towards sustainable peace, and they seal it with a Nobel laureate partnership for human rights education. While as for every other point on the globe, our human rights campaign is front and center whenever and wherever. The International Day of Human Rights, which commemorates the anniversary of the Universal Declaration and its adoption by nations all over this earth. Hence, emissaries rally in force on 6 continents. Altogether, you are looking at a slice of better than 200 campaign chapters, raising awareness, sparking action, and so inspiring citizens of every race, color, and creed to stand up for their inalienable rights. While as for every other day of human rights observance on international calendars, Youth for Human Rights inspire endless streams of signatures on petitions demanding that governments mandate human rights education in every land. And when you combine it all, that's how campaign emissaries carry the torch for human rights through more than 5,000 events and marches, thereby surpassing 500,000 signatures on pledge boards, all while uniting 600,000 citizens to ultimately impact 170 nations. And that's also the weight and power represented in New York at United Nations headquarters for the annual International Youth for Human Rights Summit. In attendance is a global assembly from 44 nations comprised of more than 400 human rights experts, advocates, professors, and diplomats, including presentations by legislative collaborators and Nobel laureate partners, whereupon dignitaries and delegates threw their collective weight behind a new proclamation to world governments, an urgent declaration in the name of human rights through education. And that's bringing human rights to life. And yes, that's also making the dream of the Universal Declaration a reality for all generations to come for this IAS anniversary 2023. Now, while it's one thing to make people aware of and enforce their rights they have as human beings, it's quite another to restore innate dignity and honor, as in the way to happiness, and the 21 precepts to better living. And while I could show you innumerable examples from these past several years, with the booklet Restoring Calm in Hotspots of Turmoil and Violence, let's instead take a look at its power to restore the very joy of life itself. Moreover, this one stands in emphasis of the fact that when one has lost their bearings in the societal wilderness, a single airdrop package, courtesy of the IAS, can serve as the compass to guide them out. And it's all the more fitting when the compass is used by that time-honored youth movement found all over the globe, the Scouts, and in this case, the South American nation of Brazil. It's one of 200 plus countries and territories that make Scouting the world's largest youth activity, overseen by a handful of international organizations. Scouting represents a bastion for children, instilling lifelong values and preparing them to survive in this world. And it's all the more critical here, considering half of all Brazilian youth live below the poverty line. and so risk falling into a life of violence and crime. But now we arrive in the Brazilian state of Sergipe, home base for one Marcos Antonio Correa Santos Jr., otherwise known as Chief Marcos. He's a scout master and founder of a Brazilian international scouting organization. They call it ORIS, which stands for the Universal Organization of Scouts, and they live by their purpose to develop the maximum potential of youth through scouting. Yet now enter the pandemic, where Brazil was hit particularly hard, and where historically high poverty rates now skyrocketed to unheard of levels. Googling the question, is there a way to happiness? Marcos is soon immersed in the full online curriculum. But it was when he reached Precept 21, Flourish and Prosper, that he knew he had the tool to uplift his scouting empire. Whereupon Marcos no sooner receives the educator's kit than he is next mapping out implementation of the 21 precepts right into the scouting curriculum itself. Hence, he begins by guiding scoutmasters through the full lesson plan, which Chief Marcos now mandates as required study for every troop leader. Next, determining that every Way to Happiness precept forwards the Scout motto, be prepared, and the Scout slogan, do a good turn daily, Chief Marcos commissions the design and manufacture of a new series of merit badges: set a good example, be worthy of trust, be industrious, one for each of the 21 precepts. And with that, Chief Marcos now equips every one of his scout masters with their own Way to Happiness educator for proliferation. He launches them along a trail that runs as follows: to the south at Joinville in Santa Catarina State, and where scout leaders prepare the ground with a first orientation to the Way to Happiness, followed by presentation of their own personalized copies. Precepts perfectly aligned with the Scout Oath to keep physically strong, mentally awake, and morally straight, and so precepts are immediately linked to camp activities. Lessons in the 4 food groups, essential for taking care of oneself, uniform inspections by section leaders who put be of good appearance into practice, precision tent assembly in emphasis of be competent, and that's troop number 2, proudly earning their first 3 precept merit badges. Scoutmasters similarly blaze new trails to the north in Pernambuco State, infusing the precepts through the ranks right down to Cub Scouts, who are next initiating neighborhood cleanups to safeguard and improve their environment, all of which then culminates in an official ceremony acknowledging exemplary service to the Scouts outdoor code with a first well-earned Way to Happiness merit badge. Chief Marcos drives the precepts still farther north into Paraíba State, and where the Way to Happiness provides a path to fulfill another scouting promise: to help other people at all times. And that inspires application of love and help children, and its corollary, honor and help your parents. Whereupon Chief Marcos is next marking another historical event, conferring a first ever Way to Happiness Scouting Medal for attainment of every one of the 21 merit badges. And that's the sum and substance of what rolls out across the rest of Brazil, from the Amazon basin to the Rio coast, and from the southern grasslands to Sao Paulo's urban jungle, until no less than 42 troops are adopting the precepts, with a Way to Happiness integrated into scouting across 17 states of Brazil. But where this story goes positively epic is when Chief Marcos is next driving the precepts beyond Brazilian borders, first to Ecuador and then to Colombia, at which point it goes fully international all the way to Africa, Nepal, India, Pakistan, and beyond, whereupon the gratitude of scouts is rolling in from all over this earth, Chile, Mexico, Spain, Kenya, on and on, until even in the face of the pandemic, Chief Marcos brought the way to happiness to scouting in no less than 16 nations. And yes, that's forging the path for youth to flourish and prosper thanks to your support of the IAS. Our next campaign is the one that begs the question, have you heard there is a global pandemic? And I am not referencing the COVID pandemic. That one only lasted a few years. No, I'm talking about the global pandemic that has been killing another human being every 3.5 minutes for the past decade, and right on up to present time. So what else need be said as to why the IAS sponsors the Truth About Drugs Crusade? Well, how about a saga that takes us right to the center of the playing field, meaning when tackling colossal levels of consumption, you need the muscle to reach millions at the snap of a finger, or in this case, at the toss of an American football. The game tops the ratings as the country's #1 sports obsession. Thus, it's no surprise National Football League players are among the most popular role models for American youth. And on that count, I give you NFL legend Marshall Faulk, one of the most celebrated running backs of all time. He was a centerpiece of a St. Louis Rams team considered to be the greatest NFL offense of all time, earning them the moniker Greatest Show on Turf. In fact, Marshall not only powered the Rams all the way to Super Bowl victory, but throughout his career he was named Offensive Player of the Year 3 years in a row, won the NFL's Most Valuable Player award, and today he is enshrined in the NFL Hall of Fame. So yes, Mr. Faulk is NFL royalty. But now fast forward to another sporting event altogether. A celebrity golf tournament where, by chance, Drug-Free World volunteers are distributing booklets. Turns out Marshall, an avid golfer, had seen them at event after event, and curiosity finally got the better of him. And so came his first introduction to the program. It immediately struck a chord for the fact he had seen so many youth lost to drugs while growing up in the projects of New Orleans. So he fully engages himself, reading and viewing all campaign materials, at which point he is next contacting Drug-Free World with a proposition as direct as it gets. I think you guys need to make me the national spokesperson. And he announces it with his own personalized card, complete with a quick response code, and linking right to the campaign homepage with his own gift of the booklet and online course. With that, Marshall sets the game plan. Whenever I do an event, Drug-Free World is there. On-field action begins in the schools, in this case, home to the Arizona State champion football team. Marshall delivers his personal message to hundreds of up-and-coming athletes, and I quote, "Hey, I am not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just trying to educate you so you know what to do." Whereupon students immediately gravitate to Marshall's webpage, connecting to online courses at drugfreeworld.org. Marshall repeats the pattern coast to coast. By way of example, in this California high school, and the same again in this Florida school, repeating the message, learn the truth about drugs. But now let's take it to the playing fields and grassroots action in nationwide NFL youth football camps. Marshall brings the truth about drugs on site with pledge boards and sports packs containing booklets, documentary, and Marshall's card for every camper. At which point, NFL players across the league are picking up Marshall's play. The Baltimore Ravens, the Miami Dolphins, Chicago Bears, Houston Texans, Atlanta Falcons, Arizona Cardinals, New York Giants, altogether 20 NFL teams following Marshall's drug-free world playbook. All of which brings us to what you have been waiting for and the greatest spectacle on earth, the Super Bowl. Miami 2020. Pre-game action begins in Miami's Ideal Org and where Marshall leads a pep rally for 100 volunteer linemen. His strategy? Drug-free world runs the ground game while Marshall plays the air game at Super Bowl Media Week leading up to the game. His message gets right to the point. We are educating kids about drugs. And with Truth About Drugs booklets front and center, he takes it across every network and sports news outlet right up to game day. At which point, every play goes into action on the field where drug-free world volunteers do massive Truth About Drugs distribution all over the fan zones. And by the time the Kansas City Chiefs take home the trophy, Miami was infused with 250,000 booklets, all while Marshall's drug-free world message reaches 31 million more. Skip the year 2021 pandemic restrictions, but enter 2022 with a vengeance at LA SoFi Stadium. Super Bowl action repeats with Marshall breaking into the open field all over TV and radio, disseminating his personal message for youth across the country. Drug-Free World again runs the ground game, handing off 275,000 booklets in just 1 week, all while another 48 million viewers now know of the truth about drugs. All of which takes us to the crescendo at this year's Super Bowl in Phoenix, Arizona, and where Marshall once again sprints across national networks, coaching American parents on how to help their kids stay off drugs. And that one goes viral with digital downloads of materials multiplying 8 times over, all while volunteers distribute yet another 300,000 booklets. Total it all, and you are looking at over 500,000 Truth About Drugs online course completions, more than 2.4 million campaign materials into public hands, all of it driven by Marshall Falk, enlightening 88 million to live a better life. And yes, that's Drug-Free World's Super Bowl dynasty for this IAS anniversary 2023. For all that I've shown you along our multiple campaign trails, it is still only but a glimpse of our IAS-sponsored salvage crusade through these past 4 years. So here's the stratospheric view and global report in the name of uplifting humanity every waking hour of every day. It begins with strategic mailings in the name of human rights, enlightening professors, community groups, and social activists, who in turn reach for educator kits, with better than 4,000 adopting our program just since we last met. Then again, while other schools and universities offer a virtual curriculum, United for Human Rights now boasts 4 times the number of students online. Combine it all, and that's how we have now educated more than 41 million on their inalienable rights. Then there is what the way to happiness engenders in the name of moral resurgence. Look no further than hand-to-hand distribution into every flashpoint of pandemic turmoil and immediately dropping crime rates by double digits. Combine that with targeted mailings, engendering still more collaborations across the social strata, totaling nearly 4,000 new partnerships, thereby impelling a movement that has now placed more than 130 million books into the hands of humanity. Finally, there's our Drug-Free World campaign, now spanning more nations than any other drug initiative on Earth, consequently inspiring ever-increasing adoption by like-minded groups and organizations, amounting to 13,000 new partnerships, thus driving Truth About Drugs distribution to a cumulative 150 million worldwide. Combine it all, and our global salvage campaigns have now uplifted more than 300 million thanks to your support of the IAS. With that, we advance to both a final word on global salvage and our second Freedom Medal winner of the night. The story is testament to persistence and perseverance in the face of an unrelenting onslaught of drugs in the society. So, if you've already seen Drug-Free World in the largest drug consumer nation on earth, what about those who work the ground zero of narco trafficking? Then again, while many may ask, what could I possibly do about that? Well, those you're about to meet not only ask that same question, but they have lived the answer for 2 decades. And this is their story.
For too many Mexican children, the trajectory of life goes from cradle to cartel. Because by the age of 9, they're recruited as lookouts and drug mules. 12-year-olds guard hideouts armed with AR-15s. And turning 16 means earning their stripes as cold-blooded assassins or dying in the attempt. But rescuing a generation with the truth about drugs are Drug-Free World Crusaders and IAS Freedom Medal winners for 2023, Salomon and Lucy Dava. Born in a burgeoning Mexico City, Salomon and Lucy met in 1965 and married the following year. Searching for a way to successfully raise their family, together they discovered Scientology in 1978. Ascending the bridge all the way to New OT8 and expanding across the dynamics, Salomon and Lucy felt the urgent need to take on greater responsibility for what most threatened their nation's survival by establishing the Foundation for a Drug-Free Mexico.
We could see society decaying. We had to reach as many people as we could with the truth about drugs.
I believe humanity does not wait for you. You are the one who makes the change.
Given knowledge equals control, Salomon and Lucy's plan is simple. Get the truth about drugs to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. They begin at Mexico City's Independence Monument, and the timing couldn't be better. It's teeming with football fans celebrating Mexico's Olympic victory. The Drug-Free World team scores big, distributing 1,600 booklets an hour. Next, At the historic center of the city, they commemorate the International Day Against Drugs with another 1,000 booklets. And at the Pyramids of the Sun and Moon, it's 1,200 more to tourists. Thereafter, Drug-Free World Mexico is everywhere vulnerable kids congregate and families gather, disseminating the truth about drugs to more than 140,000. While to extend their reach exponentially, Solomon and Lucy bring on board the head of a leading advertising firm, securing sponsorship to take the campaign into Mexico City's metros. At which point, it's public service announcements playing 3 times an hour, 19 hours a day, across 70 metro stations, until Solomon and Lucy connect with some 5 million commuters each and every day, thereby permeating the truth about drugs across the length and breadth of Mexico City.
We wanted to bring information everywhere. We wanted to arm the people who were confronting the problem head on. And we did it on a huge scale.
Solomon and Lucy set out to forge partnerships with those on the right side of the narco-trafficking equation. They connect with the commander of Mexico State's Auxiliary Security Forces. His men hold the line in strategic facilities like hospitals and airports. The upshot? He greenlights a first workshop. Solomon and Lucy march 2,200 officers through the program. PSAs on the most abused drugs, interactive lessons, and truth about drugs booklets. It's the same again for the school safety police, who work prevention with kids on campuses. And Solomon moves up the law enforcement ladder with seminars to the federal police. Whereupon, with military precision, police units unleash the truth into some of the busiest points on the state map. Tally it up, and that's Drug-Free World and law enforcement infusing nearly 200,000 booklets, all while a battalion of anti-drug officers, more than 4,000 strong, steer the state of Mexico to a drug-free future.
Kids were being recruited by the cartels. It was a race of reaching them before the cartels did.
The plan? Train an army of teachers to educate entire student bodies. Solomon and Lucy implement their top-down strategy at the State of Mexico's Ministry of Education. Meeting with a ministry representative, they seal the deal for an initial pilot. It comprises training for secondary school teachers, some of whom face death threats for teaching drug prevention. With more than 2,400 instructors, each receiving their own educator's kit, it's the biggest drug-free world training program ever. After 2 days of intensive study and drilling, they launch into classrooms across the state. In Nicolas Romero, a territory carved up by 5 competing cartels. There, it's a first lesson for teens caught in the crossfire. In Naucalpan, where students specifically request a lesson on opiates. And in Toluca, targeting the local drug of choice, marijuana. So it goes in secondary schools all across Mexico State until more than 2 million students learn the truth about drugs. And that's how husband and wife drug-free world crusaders trained over 8,500 truth about drugs instructors, educated better than 120,000 parents, placed booklets into the hands of 2.5 million, ultimately changing the trajectory of a generation. Because by authority of the Ministry of Education, the drug-free world curriculum will now be taught in every school and university across the state of Mexico. IAS Freedom Medal winners for 2023, Sullivan and Lucy Nava.
Thank you. What a special moment. What an incredible acknowledgement from the IIS to be awarded the Freedom Medal. This medal represents the passion and courage we have for the drug-free world campaign. For us, this is an honor. We will do. For us, this is an honor we will forever wear with pride. Thank you.
Now, when it comes to creating a drug-free world, if you have no intention, you get no action and no result. To achieve what we had to knock on a lot of doors. When we made an appointment, we would be told, you only have 10 minutes. But the campaign materials were the key. And that 10 minutes always turned into 90. Thank you. We know we have many more doors to open, but now it's not just the two of us, because we created an army of principals, teachers, and supervisors teaching the truth about drugs, and themselves multiplying the campaign. So yes, if you want to see the future, just talk to the students and teachers, because they will tell you we are one team, united for a drug-free Mexico. First, and for the most, we want to thank our family for all their support, which are here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to Drug Free World for the privilege of using these miraculous materials. To Scientology Media Productions for working with us to tell our story. To the IIS for making it possible for us to achieve our goals. And to all staff and every CR member for your eternal dedication. To COB, our infinite thanks for all the responsibility you have and all the responsibilities you are taking. Thank you. And finally, thanks to LRH for his vision to uplift and salvage humanity. Thank you, sir.
And with that, we arrive at the IES campaign following from that timeless LRH statement, a volunteer minister does not shut his eyes to the pain, evil, and injustice of existence. Such is the mandate of our worldwide VM force, presenting frontline technology for survival, no matter the circumstances. Well, if only to remind you, this is the overview of our Volunteer Minister Crusade. Our volunteer ministers provide all fundamental Scientology tools for immediate application and survival in both everyday crises and cataclysmic scenarios. Simultaneously, strategic mailings are sent to similarly aimed organizations for enlightenment and activation, thereby engendering a worldwide volunteer minister network. And all the while, VMs propel global cavalcades extending from orgs to city centers. While to extend VM technology everywhere else, our Scientology network also now broadcasts the full range of Tools for Life films, after which viewers log on to our virtual cavalcade and enroll in online courses for all 19 handbook chapters, and I might add, with graduates now hailing from 200 nations and territories. Combine it all, and that's how our VM Crusade brings help and succor to restore spiritual values and to otherwise demonstrate something can be done about it. To begin, let us consider that arena where VM action is now the stuff of legend. Of course, today, when speaking of disaster response, what immediately comes to mind is the pandemic. But I will go one better, as in a cataclysmic natural disaster in the middle of the pandemic. Because even if the rest of the world went on pause, Mother Nature certainly never did, nor did our volunteer ministers. And here's what it looked like since we last met. Kashmir, two tectonic plates collide, setting off a shallow 5.8 quake that demolishes roads and slows emergency response. But these are Pakistan VMs, both organizing medical camps and delivering better than 3,000 assists, altogether helping more than 9,000 survivors, and so earning recognition for volunteer life support in times of greatest need. Japan. Typhoon Hagibis makes landfall as the country's heaviest storm in 60 years, swelling rivers to the breaking point. But Tokyo VMs rise above in worst-hit zones, bringing relief to nearly 2,000 displaced and dispossessed. Australia. Her cataclysmic fire scorched 46 million acres, more than the size of England and Wales combined. But VMs run nonstop logistics and assist lines for 2 straight months, reviving exhausted firefighters and ultimately helping 39,000 in the burn zones. Indonesia, nearly 15 inches of rain in 6 hours unleashes flash floods, inundating the capital of Jakarta. But VMs connect with local community groups and healthcare centers and train more than 100 caregivers on tech for trauma relief. Croatia, the strongest earthquake in well over a century, strikes near the capital, reducing entire blocks to rubble. But these are neighboring Italian VMs, logging 12,000 round-trip miles to donate supplies for rebuilding homes, and that response plays out on national news, highlighting VM cross-border assistance. St. Vincent, her big volcano blows its stack for the first time in decades and chokes the Caribbean island in a foot of ash. But VMs out of Miami and Clearwater mobilize for supply runs to villages cut off from all creation and clear 50 tons of ash from island drainage systems, altogether helping 20,000 in dire need. Haiti, the most powerful quake in 2 centuries, shatters the southwest coast, laying waste to 53,000 homes. But 120 rapid response VMs trained on site deliver a battery of assist seminars for community leaders and relief and rescue teams, all of which in turn boosts VM ranks and puts nearly 5,000 Haitians back on their feet. Pakistan, a monsoon on steroids and melting glaciers put 30% of the country underwater, displacing 8 million. But teams of VMs, including medical doctors, perform triage and dispense emergency rations across 11 inundated sites. They also run volunteer minister seminars morning to night, all of which is why 13,000 will never forget the yellow shirts. Florida, Hurricane Ian slams the southwest coast, making landfall at Category 4. But IAS Freedom Medal winner John Travolta airlifts urgent provisions for utterly decimated communities, whereupon Florida's megaforce of VMs takes over distribution, relieving stranded families everywhere in any way, all to help 5,000 get back on solid ground. Turkey, a 7.8 earthquake goes on record as the nation's deadliest in 15 centuries, but an international VM contingent becomes the first non-governmental organization to enter the hardest-hit province, stringing distribution lines for 160 tons of necessities, thereby uplifting 43,000 amidst the rubble. And if you were already hot, sweaty, and breathless just from watching, there's also Puerto Rico's biggest quake in a century, Tennessee tornadoes tearing through Nashville Metro, volcanic eruptions on Spain's Canary Islands, Sardinia wildfires burning up 50,000 acres, Hurricane Ida pummeling the Gulf Coast, and Cape Town's fire torching the national parliament. Now, combine that with every other quake-shattered, storm-drenched, and fire-ravaged landscape where VMs answer the call, and you are looking at disaster response across 20 nations at no less than 45 sites of catastrophic upheaval and more than 8 million hours of indiscriminate help in the worst of times and places. And yes, that's proving something can be done about it for this IAS anniversary 2023. Notwithstanding epic VM response at natural disasters, let's put it all in the category of first aid. Meaning, just as with a traumatic physical injury, where one applies a tourniquet to stop the bleeding until a surgeon can take over and handle the rest, likewise, VM disaster response immediately addresses the traumatic mental and spiritual shock until every other tool can be brought to bear. In that regard, no one who has been helped by a VM will ever forget it. Then again, if only because of their unforgettable yellow shirts, a volunteer minister always leaves a calling card, whereupon begins the greater mission of our global VM crusade. In fact, it is the very foundation upon which LRH created the role of a volunteer minister, and I quote, "He uses the technology of Scientology to change conditions for the better, for himself, his family, his groups, friends, associates, and for mankind." Of course, LRH is referencing the Scientology Handbook and all the technology contained therein. Study tech, the dynamics, ARC and the tone scale, assists, ethics, marriage, children, not to mention tools for the workplace and basics of organizing. In other words, the technology for all of life. So yes, the VM motto is very true. And by that, I am referencing the full motto. No matter how bad your problem is, something can be done about it. Now, that's a fairly abrasive statement, no matter how bad your problem is. It certainly leaves no room for any ifs, ands, or buts. Well, here is a story that proves it is true. A story of volunteer ministers uplifting an entire nation. South Africa. Although she finally threw off the chains of apartheid, the full promise of a new future goes unanswered, for with no educational system or infrastructure, her people continue to suffer from what was intentionally denied them for 50 years. Hence, a crippled economy with one of the highest unemployment rates on record, and just when it began to turn around, the pandemic hit, and hit hard, with the government implementing a level 5 hard lockdown, including police checkpoints, even military patrols. But now enter our new IAS-sponsored Kyalami Castle, serving as central base of Sea Org operations, and which immediately transforms into National Disaster Response Headquarters. Owing to how rapidly our Sea Org VMs mobilized, the Brigadier of Midrand Police immediately declares us an essential force to the health and safety of South Africa. In fact, making our VMs the only non-governmental organization authorized to travel anywhere and everywhere across the province and country. And such is the backdrop of now legendary VM sanitization of every sector of South Africa's essential services necessary to keep the nation running. If only for the history books, it included daily sanitization of 300 buses across 54 stations for a cumulative 50,000. Same again for South Africa's primary mode of public transportation, with daily sanitization of 14,000 taxis and a cumulative 1.1 million. More again for emergency services, including daily sanitization of fire departments across the Gauteng province, totaling more than 150 million square feet. Weekly sanitization of 70 metro police stations for almost 400 million square feet. Same again with weekly sanitization of 300 medical facilities and health clinics, at which point, by invitation, into South Africa's national defense bases, one per day, every day. And finally, to keep the gears of the nation turning, sanitization of judicial offices and courthouses, as well as city, provincial, and national government administrative buildings, more than 600 every week, until total it all, and you are looking at more than 11 billion with a B square feet. But now, this story gets interesting, and the greater mission begins. For with VMs leaving their calling card everywhere, those who had been helped began streaming to Kyalami, beginning with the Department of Health. What most captured their attention, far more than D7 sanitization, was our organization and competence in the face of utter turmoil. So they asked, what do you know that nobody else does? Our answer, the Scientology Handbook. And so began a training partnership that would soon ripple out across the veritable pillars of South African society in the name of empowerment. First responders are the first to arrive. The seminar starts with an introduction to the Scientology Handbook, at which point every attendee is enrolled directly online. The site contains the full handbook and lesson plan. Naturally, the training begins with study technology. Attendees watch the Tools for Life film, followed by full study of the entire chapter. And there is no student wait because lessons are graded automatically. In fact, for a passing grade, the site immediately generates a certificate the student can download and print. And if you ever wondered how we can train the masses, there's your answer. Whereupon, with study tech under their belt, those students are now set to continue through the rest of the online curriculum, chapter by chapter, all while putting the tech into immediate application, as in those first responders at community shelters applying the chapter on assists, same again at local hospitals. After which they return to Kyalami and, with all certificates in hand and evidence of application, they complete their final course assignment and, next graduating as brand new, full-fledged volunteer ministers charged with carrying the mission further still. As such, and such is the pattern and curriculum that rolls out day after day, week after week, across the agriculture industry, where, beset by no organizational technology, 99% of all farms literally fail, but with training of officials from municipal, provincial, and national departments of agriculture, more than 800 professionals in all, they are next employing basics of organizing in outlying farms where yields immediately increase more than 3 times over. There's more for civic and community leaders, including municipal councils and provincial governments, all of whom seek answers to record levels of unemployment, but with councils and organizations trained through more than 400 seminars, they now use targets and goals to bolster community development, at which point their citizens are volunteering 2.5 million hours on behalf of their communities, all while more than 9,000 officials are now trained as volunteer ministers. There's more again for educators, with seminars drawing professionals from every echelon: pre-kindergarten, primary school, secondary school, vocational colleges, universities, not to mention learner support and tutoring, thus empowering no less than 6,000 educators. And with application of study tech right into classrooms, including daily word clearing sessions, the number of students at risk of dropping out of school plummets by 80%. And with implementation into nearly 1,000 schools, that's 160,000 students also now empowered. Finally, and most importantly, there's our religious brethren. From every Judeo-Christian religion to Islam, Eastern, and African traditional, more than 3,500 leaders from all denominations, and to whom we provide Scientology tools so they may help their congregations and achieve their aims. Consequently, clergy are next delivering sermons and counseling using the Scientology Handbook until their church attendance is next rising by a full 30%, with the VM program embracing more than 2,000 houses of worship, ultimately helping uplift 2.2 million. But if that's the whirlwind overview, then here's the grand view. Just since lockdowns and in the face of the pandemic, no less than 500,000 individual handbook course completions, while across every sector of society, we graduated more than 22,000 fully trained volunteer ministers to uplift South Africa. And if you still wonder how far and wide, I give you a Joburg City Hall Forum headlined by South African President Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, and seated just beside him, the VM Public Relations Officer Africa. While as for the message from the President, Scientology works on empowerment of communities. That is why we want to engage with you, and yes, that's fulfilling at the very cradle of humanity for this IS anniversary 2023.
So was that a 2017 event? It wasn't six.
Final statement as regards our VM movement through these past 4 years. And let's put it under the heading of global view and all-inclusive view, or better yet, call it the incisive view. And here's what I mean. First, while one could speak of the COVID pandemic itself, where it came from, how it spread, who it infected and affected, on and on, let's just skip that. It's about the only thing anyone heard for years, and factually, none of that talk benefited anyone except the talking head news media generating booming ratings. After all, they aren't called merchants of chaos for nothing. And what they were selling was a message of nothing can be done about it. Second, while one could also speak about all else that ensued in the aftermath of the pandemic, what with lockdowns, consequent no production, no education, not to mention rioting in the streets, and even the halls of power, well, all that proves is that the so-called solutions were enough to trigger a planetary psychotic break. And finally, consider the last time this planet suffered a pandemic was 100 years ago. History shows it took 2 years for that one to run its course, about the same time as the one we just suffered. Seems to me, 100 years later, somebody should have been able to do a better job. Yes, somebody could have done a better job. In fact, we did. And having done so, it's time to tell the rest of the world so they know it. As in, a new feature-length documentary in full demonstration that something can always be done about it.
International lockdown storm. Never before in modern times. The second wave.
You're right.
Oh, yeah. Grammy Award-winning artist Fred Smiles.
With that, we appropriately arrive at our final Freedom Medal winner of the night, and a story embracing virtually all you have thus far seen, from response to natural disaster to baseline human salvage, and from a first restoration of spiritual values to total freedom itself. Moreover, it's a story in dramatic demonstration of what it means to be a Scientologist, with a purpose and dedication to achieving the very aims of Scientology. That it all unfolds in defiance of these pandemic years makes it all the more astonishing. And so I give you a tale of total responsibility.
It's one of the 7 wonders of the modern world, a 50-mile engineering marvel that links the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. When ships began flowing through the Panama Canal, this idyllic slice of Central America became an international economic force. Yet in the wake of that came crime, corruption, and drugs, threatening to turn this paradise into a paradise lost. But leading a moral and spiritual revolution on behalf of a nation is Scientology pioneer and IAS Freedom Medal winner for 2023, Giselle Lima. Growing up in Venezuela, Giselle graduated university as a production engineer. Thereafter, she and her family immigrated to Panama. Yet where her story comes to life is when Giselle traveled to Spain to pursue her master's degree. By happenstance, she lived right across the street from Madrid's Ideal Org, where she soon after discovered Scientology and never looked back, racing up the bridge all the way to new OT8, and then completing Cause Resurgence, Superpower, and the L Rundowns, all while graduating as a Class 4 auditor. Whereupon, Giselle determined to plant a first Scientology flag in her adopted homeland of Panama.
I did Superpower and I realized I had to do more. I was not doing enough. After that, the Scientology network opened. And this is when I say, okay, wow, now I have this amazing tool and I can disseminate, but I have nowhere to route people in.
As a first step, Giselle contacts local book buyers living in Panama, inviting them to a first ever Clear Panama event. Her message, help me build a Scientology mission. And before the night is through, Giselle is signing on new staff. Next, she begins her search for Ideal Mission premises. As the first physical presence of Scientology in the country, Giselle knew the mission had to be prominent. And so it was, at the heart of Panama City's business district. Giselle then launches into planning and renovations, and flanked by family and future mission staff, she brings her vision to grand opening. All coalesces on October 6, 2019, where Giselle announces Scientology's presence in Panama with authority. The opening is attended by opinion leaders from across the spectrum of Panama society, even including an author of the National Constitution. And when Giselle pulls the ribbon, it's not only the first Scientology mission on Panamanian soil, but it's also the first Ideal mission in Latin America. Whereupon, the entrance gates to the bridge are indeed open, and Panamanians embark on every Scientology introductory route. Simultaneously, Giselle permeates a citywide bookstore chain, laying the foundation for a future Book One boom. And with new public now flooding the mission, Giselle had indeed firmly established a first Scientology foothold in Panama.
I saw that the only thing that could actually save mankind and could save the society was LRH Tech. So I did everything I could and that I had at my hand to make this happen.
And specifically to address rising criminality, the nation's biggest ruin, by bringing on the Way to Happiness. A top-down strategy begins at the government ministry overseeing Panama's armed forces. Giselle introduces the Way to Happiness, leading to a first seminar at no less than the National Police Academy. To all but guarantee success, Giselle requests reinforcement from the Free Wings, Colombian legends, General Carlos Mena and Colonel Ricardo Prado. They commence with a crash course in the Way to Happiness, precept by precept through the booklet, and all 21 public service announcements. It's more of the same at the National Border Service, and again at the Aero Naval National Headquarters, and more again to every branch of Panama's security forces. With the National Armed Services now educated on the booklet, they deploy into the fabric of Panama culture, to the Marina of Portobello, in Panama City's fish market, in the heart of the Old City, and everywhere else across the nation's capital. But all culminates with Panama's annual carnival. It's the largest such celebration in Central America and historically sets off a spike in crime. Giselle starts by assembling her Way to Happiness troops. Officers unload box after box of booklets, then take them hand to hand along the mile-long parade route. By the time the massive street party ends, it's not only 100,000 booklets in 5 days, it's also an unprecedented zero-incident scenario without a single act of criminal violence.
Just after we finished with the Way to Happiness, we were about to do more, then we had the pandemic. Then I said, no, we can still get LRH Tech there.
Panama was locked down for months, but even after reopening, churches were still in a crisis, with congregations remaining at home. So Giselle sets out to restore the first sense of community. Specifically, she rallies a team of Panamanian volunteer ministers to bring solutions to all faiths. They launch into the Metropolitan Cathedral with every staywell sanitization protocol. The VMs repeated at the 17th century Church of San Jose, the Church of St. Francis of Assisi, the National Shrine of the Immaculate Heart, and across every religious denomination. Until Giselle is next assembling no less than the leaders of Panama's faith community to form a permanent alliance, united under the banner of freedom of religion, belief, and practice for all. And that's how, in just the first 1,000 days since grand opening, Giselle not only laid the foundation of the bridge, but she also spearheaded a movement, delivering every humanitarian solution at this Central American paradise, instilling calm to some 160,000, and partnering with organizations at every strata and sector of society. And that's also the story of how, in the face of a pandemic, Giselle blazed the trail for true spiritual freedom, not just full religious recognition, but full tax exemption by order of the national government of the Republic of Panama. IAS Freedom Medal winner for 2023, Giselle Lima.
Thank you. I have to say that when I started walking this path, it never crossed my mind that I would be standing here. However, I couldn't be prouder to receive this medal. Serving my religion to the best of my capabilities and using my position to lay the foundation for Scientology in Panama has been the best decision I have ever made. It is my honor to represent and stand up for Scientology in my country. And the satisfaction of waking up every day, knowing that I'm working to make this a better world, doesn't compare to any other job that I have ever done. Being able to take Scientology in Panama from zero to where we stand today, in just a few years of hard work, is my greatest accomplishment. And as of tonight, that accomplishment is a win for all of us and all Scientologists. Of course, I would have never been able to achieve what I have on my own. So I would like to express my gratitude to those who have helped me through my journey. A special thanks to my brother Mariano, who has been both my right and left hands in each one of the activities that have been created in Panama. I have no words. To my father, for supporting all my crazy ideas. And to the rest of my family for their faith and their help. I'd like to thank my staff for their continued dedication and service, and to the many executives of the Church of Scientology International, the Free Wings, and PR offices around the world. Thank you for your constant help and for always believing in me. Look at what we created. To COB RTC, you are the source of my inspiration to carry on and keep doing the job until it is done. Thank you, sir. And of course, my deepest gratitude goes to LRH, to whom I owe everything I am. You can count me as your soldier from now to eternity.
And with that, the time has come to put a final stamp on the past 4 years, all of which is another way of saying it's time to ignite the afterburners on a rocket ride into the future. Because make no mistake, the word future is synonymous with expansion. That is not a metaphorical concept. Rather, it is a law the entire universe obeys. We as Scientologists understand that nothing ever remains the same. Things are either getting better or they are getting worse. And that is why survival as a group demands expansion. Then again, it also explains why pandemic restrictions inflicted on the entire planet were so suppressive. No matter the wording, they always spelled stop. But of course, that word stop is not and never will be part of our vocabulary. First, and as you've just witnessed, we harness the power of all our dissemination facilities established through the last decade to bring our solutions and technology at previously unimaginable orders of magnitude. Hence, even if lockdowns in parts of the world temporarily prevented some of our orgs from opening their doors to the public, we now have an international dissemination and distribution center which made it possible to take those solutions to the public by the tens of millions. Moreover, with Scientology TV all over the airwaves and innumerable streaming platforms, broadcasting programs that drive viewers to our websites for online courses, we are factually introducing more people to Scientology every year than in previous decades combined. But lest there be any doubt, all of that is just a means to an end, meaning the achievement of the aims of Scientology requires the application of LRH technology in our groups, centers, and organizations. All of which is what returns us to the future we are creating in the name of expansion and the very substance of not on pause. Yes, it is true that when the pandemic hit, global supply and logistics lines were shattered, and yes, that also meant that construction lines were temporarily shut down as well. But that didn't mean we had to stop. No, we continued to press forward to flourish and prosper in spite of all. As a first step, and while everyone else went on a course of contraction, even closing their offices and making work at home the new order of the day, we relentlessly pushed onward, acquiring new buildings for future ideal orgs in Australia, Austria, Canada, Denmark, Germany, Italy, Switzerland, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and of course the USA. That's 10 nations totaling nearly 1 million square feet. Next, we massively expanded our planning and construction lines until today, where we partner with the largest design firm on Earth and the largest project management firm on Earth. If that's a nebulous concept to you, then here are the numbers to put it in black and white. Take all of the ideal orgs and ideal advanced orgs we have already opened since inception of the ideal strategy. They total a staggering 5,352,159 square feet. Make it easy to remember, just think 5.3 million square feet. By the way, that includes flag. But now, take all the buildings we currently have moving through planning and construction for future ideal, and it totals 5.1 million square feet. So yes, we are on the runway to double our ideal presence planet-wide, and yes, that's the future. But if that's the future to roll out next year and beyond, then let me now present the immediate future. Meaning, it's time to start cutting some ribbons. Now, ordinarily at an IES event, we would strictly focus on new IES-sponsored projects. But bearing in mind where we are, it is only appropriate we begin at St. Hill. And although not strictly an ideal org, this building's importance cannot be overstated, especially when you consider St. Hill is where OTs are made for the UK continent. Moreover, it's from continental management at St. Hill that UK expansion is generated. And since the power that makes it all possible is the staff of St. Hill, well, what more need be said? And so I give you our latest done in the name of an ideal UK Sea Org base. Here it is. Bearing in mind more than half the audience in attendance tonight are from the European continent, our next one likewise could not be more appropriate. Moreover, considering the UK's departure from the European Union, or what is otherwise known as Brexit, it becomes even more significant to European Scientologists who can freely travel and cross all EU borders with no red tape. I'm, of course, speaking of St. Hill's sister org in Copenhagen, Denmark, established by LRH to provide the advanced levels to multilingual Scientologists from across the scores of nations that make up the European continent. Moreover, Denmark is also home to European Continental Management, responsible for all groups, missions, and churches from across that vast continent. Well, beyond even that, Denmark is also the home of New Era Publications, responsible for the publication and dissemination of all translated LRH books, lectures, and materials. But naturally, every organization that comprises our European headquarters is aligned to a single purpose: to help every being from Europe move up the bridge to the highest states of OT. And here is a new facility to advance that very purpose. So, if you have just seen another milestone in the creation of an ideal Sea Org base for the United Kingdom, then this next is a final milestone in the creation of a fully ideal Sea Org base for Europe. With that, let's shift our gaze to a different hemisphere. Our strategy stems from the fact that no matter our efforts to expose and prosecute psychiatric atrocities, no matter our efforts to disseminate materials by the millions for fourth dynamic salvage, the road upwards doesn't really commence until we apply LRH technology for human salvage. Indeed, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, and in response to the wake-up call, the IAS sponsored the establishment of international footholds for LRH social betterment. It began with Narconon Arrowhead as the flagship facility for drug rehabilitation, and that was soon followed by flagship facilities for both applied scholastics and the Way to Happiness. The purpose of such facilities is not just the one-on-one application of their respective technologies. Rather, their purpose is to serve as the international centers for the training of professionals who in turn open new centers far and wide. Today, and in full application of the LRH formula for expansion, the strategy extends to the creation of social betterment training centers in every continental zone. As for the one you are about to see, all you need to consider is what you have already seen this evening. And here it is.
Graduation as well. Yeah, there will be graduation classes. We will get some stories. I might carry on the speed as well.
South Africa. Narconon, South Africa. Did you enjoy the event?
And now let's put an exclamation point on expansion.
Did you go all 3 days?
For we now advance to the core strategy of the IAS vis-a-vis our ideal org empire, namely the creation of IAS-sponsored ideal orgs in cultural epicenters of Earth, megacities of significance to our entire global movement, and thus places that affect every single Scientologist on this planet. To date, they have included New York, Madrid, Berlin, Brussels, Dublin, Harlem, London, Rome, Taiwan, Tel Aviv, Tokyo, and Washington, D.C. But if you know your geography and geopolitics, then you will have realized there remains one glaring omission, especially since it doesn't get much more mega than this one. Take virtually any index, world's best cities, most livable cities, most powerful cities, and best destinations. This one ranks in the topmost standings across the boards. In fact, she is the most visited city on Earth at 44 million people just last year. And if that still doesn't say it, she is also known as the cultural capital of the world. What's more, and most pertinent to our story, she is home to the very first Church of Scientology on European soil. Thank you. Then again, anyone familiar with our history in this land also knows it has been the site of epic battles through the decades, and in fact a city where we once marched in the streets, raising our voice in the name of religious freedom, but now a city where we are soon to be dancing in the streets, raising our voice in the name of total freedom. And with that, my friends, I give you the ultimate example of the ultimate handling, because this is how we flourish and prosper today.
I've been a bit struggling with I've been trying to find my issues and make a part of
Paris.
For liberty we stand. We stand. For liberty we stand.
Oh, okay.
Un endroit d'égalité, un lieu de fraternité. The world from body, bringing truth where our friends can go free. C'est maintenant notre chance, notre rêve, notre espoir pour notre France. Ensemble nous sommes forts, nous sommes terres, nous sommes libres, nous sommes là pour la France. We stand for liberty, liberty stand. La France, this is our chance. For liberty we stand. We stand. For liberty we stand. We will light up the world from body. Bringing truth where our friends can go free. For liberty we stand.
And now that we have metaphorically blown the roof right off this marquee, and that hole is likewise pierced through the great North Star, we come to the close of this evening's event. As such, it is traditionally the moment when I ask that you ponder what it means to support the IES. So yes, while I could tell you that it is everything, it is both our mythology and our history, and it is both the legacy we bequeath and the legacy we inherit. Yes, well, I could also tell you what it means to ascend the ladder of IES commitment as lifetime patron, patron meritorious, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, and on up to exalted statuses that transcend this Earth's atmosphere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
It's nice, right?
let me do it another way. Yes, be here tonight.
Okay, great. Thank
Second
you.
and time to say
Oh,
the
good.
two
You already
words
did 3 hours
I'd
here.
most like to say before
Well
the
done.
night is out.
Oh my God, I feel like
Because
it's so cold in here.
at no time in the past 100 years did this planet experience a group engram as just occurred these past few years. A planetary population in confusion, at effect, in fear. But there we were, a stable datum at cause, bringing real help. Then again, in a world where the workforce was wiped out, all while entire industries went bust, there we were, keeping the bridge open and even expanding into the future. Until we arrive at tonight, not just on the runway to infinity, but fully airborne at Mach speed. And while others may ponder the whys and wherefores and how it could possibly be, the answer is quite obvious as it's sitting right in front of me. So, my final 2 words for this evening could not be more true, for they are quite simply, thank you. Because yes, tonight and for eternity, now and forever, we are the IES 2LRH. Hip hip! 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 Thank you very much. Have a great evening.